to go. Hello, everyone. I'm Sheila Belanger. I'm so jazzed to be with you in this webinar, Visioning 2021, Align with the Archetypal Astrology Cycles. I'm a transformation coach and an archetypal astrologer, and I love giving my people support through the lens of astrology. And heaven knows these are like more than interesting times, people. These are like wild, crazy ass times. So let's get some help from the astrology characters to be able to get some sense of what is happening here. So, okay, good. So everybody's good. I want to just, as we start, the chat box is there. You can make comments. I know how chat boxes go. I'm fine with that. If you have specific questions, please put it in the Q&A box, because I'll be checking that at the end of the lecture, which is about an hour. Just to let you know, we'll be doing an hour of lecture, and then optionally you can stay on for another half hour while I'll give you a guided imagery journey. And I'll also tell you about the Vibes community, a very special private membership that I work with and support, and love to let you stay and see some of that information. Okay, so here we go. Do be putting your questions in as you go. And we're going to fasten your seatbelts. Time to rock and roll. Okay. Here's a nice quote from Anne Norhaus. For all its complexity, however, astrology remains fundamentally simple. It offers a time-honored system of symbols that sum up key aspects of human life while providing profound insights and practical guidance. Yes, very practical guidance. So are you ready to see yours and the world's life from a bigger perspective? I hope so. I hope that's why you're here. Because in these tumultuous edge times for our world, you need maps to help you navigate the edges of change, both personal and collective. And my goodness, have we been dancing on the edges, and many of us in such pain and suffering that we've fallen off the edge. So, tumultuous edge times. Now, archetypal astrology is an enduring navigational map to guide you at the inner and outer edges. So I invite all of us to take a threshold moment. It's an invitation to be present to this larger perspective. What I often do is I like to just sit up straight, roll my shoulders or stretch in some way, and take 3 deep breaths to really just arrive, and shut down your other devices if you can. I understand. I'm a webinar person. I know what happens when I can't see you. But I'm just really inviting you to dive in deep with me in the community. So take a threshold moment with a couple of deep clearing breaths. Ground your feet on the earth, wherever you are. And be open to this larger perspective that I'll offer you as a translator for the archetypal characters, so that you can shine the light on yours and the world's current initiatory journey, because it's so huge. We need all of us to try to be awake and aware. So have your journal nearby so you can reflect on your personal transformation journey. As I go through the information on the webinar, I'm going to pause at certain times and ask you a few questions. You can always go back to the replay to go further with it. I won't give you a lot of time, but just to jot some things down. And also, just so you know, those of you watching it, you'll get the replay, and also you'll get a downloadable PDF with the content. So it'll be much easier to just say, hey, Sheila, when are those cycles? And what was that question she asked me? So, but do be with it now and at least stir it in your unconscious, these questions. Okay, so have your journal, have your beverage nearby. Let's go. So greetings. I'm Sheila Belanger. I'm a strategic transformation coach and archetypal astrologer with over 36 years supporting thousands of people to successfully navigate their key edges of change. I've got a lot of great folk in this webinar with me who have been supported by me. And I know, thumbs up for all of you, because it's really powerful work to do your transformation journey. So this is what we're going to cover in the webinar. The archetypal astrology of the key collective cycles of 2021 and some upcoming ones for the United States. And I am going to speak about the domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol. There's some extraordinary astrology right for that day that I want to share with you. Ways to attune with the archetypal opportunities of the year, because I don't want to just give you data. I want you to take it in and let it really live inside of you and work with you in a good way, so you can lean in to the archetypal opportunities for change and transformation this year. At the end of the lecture, which again will go roughly almost an hour, I try to finish the lecture and the Q&A within the hour. There'll be a Q&A period. So remember, keep putting your questions in the Q&A box. I see them only, and I'll go look at them at the end of the formal lecture and speak to the questions. Chat, you can chat anytime. I won't have a chance to look at that much, but it's there because I know, again, how webinars go. And then at the end of the hour, those of you who want to stay on, I'm going to give you an optional guided imagery journey to Saturn and Uranus as key allies for you in 2021. So stay on for that. And also I'll talk to you about the Vibes community, the private membership that's open from January 8th to 18th. It's open now for the next 10 days for you to join and come in and answer any questions about that. Okay. Nice big breath. All right, here we go. And here's a quote. I gave it in my other recent webinar. I'm going to do it again. It's a fantastic quote from this amazing astrologer, Jessica Murray. Here's her quote. Mass consciousness change is an agonizingly slow process, but we can honor both the inner and the outer dimensions of life by living through the center of our charts, our astrology experience. That is holding steadfastly to our unique inner skill set while accepting responsibility for living when and where we live. If we despair that the necessary social changes are so vast as to be out of reach, we remind ourselves that great leaps of collective consciousness have only ever been achieved in one way, by enough individuals being tuned into the bigger picture and willing to respond to the urgency of these times. Whew. We thought with 2020 leaving, the urgency of the times might lessen a bit. Those of us living in the United States said, oh no, the urgency of the times, the edge times are so here. Jessica Murray, brilliant astrologer, Mother Sky Astrology. Mother Sky Astrology is her website. Forgot to put it on there. So just letting that be a quote that carry us through this webinar. Now we know everything is interconnected, human and other than human, visible and invisible, sky and earth. This is why astrology works. There's a deep resonance between the external so-called planets and their movements in the heavens and human experience on earth. It's not causal, it's archetypally resonant. That's something that comes from Rick Tarnas. Beautiful, archetypally resonant. So what is astrology? It's the study of how the planets and their cyclic patterns symbolically resonate with human life. What are the planets? The planets are symbolic of your core inner figures as well as the external figures in the world. Now, the planets are named after mythic gods, goddesses, and characters. It's the whole story, the mythic story in our own psyches, represented by the planets, and the mythic story in the external world journey, represented by the planets. Now, here's just a reminder, some of where some of the planet names are and their mythic association. So, for example, Mercury, remember the messenger god, he's got his little winged helmet and his winged booties, and he goes back and forth between the humans and the Olympiad gods. Venus as the goddess of love and beauty. Saturn is the god of farming and structure. Uranus is the god of the sky. Some of these characters are going to show up for us in this webinar and so forth. Now, from a spiritual perspective, a planet symbolizes an archetype, a universal principle or force that expresses in the human psyche and societal behavior on many levels. There's many levels, multi-levels of how the archetypal symbolism comes through. Now, one way of defining archetype, arca first, type, model, energies that have been present since beginning of time and are inherent in our collective existence, often found in the imaginal realm. Images, poetry, metaphor, etc. It's very universal presence. So we're going to explore some key archetypal planetary cycles in 2021 with a few upcoming ones for the USA. Now here's one map of how our characters work. Pluto's still here. Pluto's still a planet as far as I'm concerned. We will say more about that. Don't piss off the god of the underworld, okay, by demoting him or her. Okay, so what are the zodiac signs? The zodiac signs are named after star constellations and appear to form a belt around the Earth in which the planets seem to travel in their cyclic movements. The image you're looking at with this shot right now is like the sun, you can see it over there on the left side, would be between Gemini and Cancer. So we'd say the sun is in Gemini, for example. That's from our perspective on the Earth. Now, just to be really clear, the zodiac signs are not the same as the star constellations. They have the same name, but they're a different energetic belt. And astrologers know that, by the way. The zodiac sign is a 360-degree wheel, that belt that looks like it goes around us on the earth, and each of the signs is 30 degrees of arc. So there's 12 equal signs in the zodiac wheel. Okay. Now, the zodiac signs symbolize the energetic expression of the planetary archetypes. And you'll hear this in a little bit when I talk about planets in Aquarius. What does that mean, that that archetype carries the Aquarius energy? But basically, the zodiac signs are energetic expressions of the planetary characters. Now, first, before going into 2021, I feel like we have to do a review of the key astrology cycles of 2020. It is not in the rearview mirror. Yes, we can turn the calendar page over, but guess what, people? What happened archetypally in 2020 continues to live deeply in us, specifically with COVID and all the deep suffering and challenges of that, with the political, societal injustice processes, with the political dismemberment processes. It's all still here. So let's do a kind of a recap from an astrology point of view of where we've just come. So there's 3 cycles I'm going to name for you, and they all have to do with planets in Capricorn. So let me just say again, that's from a perspective of where the planets are in the sky and how we see them. So Capricorn as a zodiac sign is grounded Earth. And whenever planets are traveling in Capricorn, their energetic expression is about getting grounded, sustainable, wanting things to work. Now, it's wounded expression, because there's wounded and healthy expressions of everything. The wounded expression of Capricorn is a tight-assed, fear-based control. I will take control and I will be in charge. Okay. Now, what happened in early 2020, mid-January, is Saturn and Pluto came together. It's called conjunct in the sky. They were right next to each other. And what that basically means archetypally is face the reality of old structures that are in a death rebirth process. Well, hello, Sheila, no shit. Okay, like hello, 2020. Old structures in a death rebirth process, right? Because Saturn wants to make structures and Pluto wants to transform death and rebirth. So very powerful, energetic. And even though they came together just once in the beginning of 2020, it's a 33 to 37 year cycle. And so we're still, this one's a 35-year cycle. So we're going to be working with this as a theme for quite a while. So there's that one. Okay. Now here's your journal opportunity. All right. And you can just jot this down again. Remember, you can get a PDF with the replay that will have all these questions in it. But the Saturn Pluto growth opportunities, because these archetypal characters were asking us to change and transform. They're still asking us to change and transform. So just quickly, just jot down for 2020. How did you grow through the tension between the need to maintain your own authority and status quo life structures and the need to destructure your life through potent changes? Take a breath. You could just note, how did I balance that? The one that wanted to create structure and be in control, and the one that was in dismemberment, basically. And I would invite you to just put a couple things down, jot down. You can go back and write a lot more. Okay, I know that's not enough time, but just jot it down. You're going back to it, okay? So then the second big cycle of 2020, Jupiter conjunct Pluto, Jupiter with Pluto in Capricorn again. And I gave you the degrees, by the way. A lot of you coming to these webinars, you know astrology and you want to know, well, what degrees did those happen at, Sheila? So you can put it in your own chart or other charts you're interested in. If you don't understand degree measurements, don't let it bother you whatsoever, okay? Now, Jupiter is a very different character. Jupiter is about expansion and opening up our beliefs. Still Pluto, the deity of transformation, death, and rebirth. So Jupiter was with Pluto is exactly from April to November of 2020, but again, it's the whole year. And this was the archetypal challenge to release stuck dogmas and expand your awareness about principles. Hello, personal and collective. It's a 12-year cycle that's just started. And again, we'll be working with that for 12 years. So then, brief question to just think about or jot down a few things, come back to the Jupiter-Pluto growth opportunities from last year. What old beliefs and dogmas needed to die very personally? And how did you learn to live a more ethical life? How did your principles grow? Hopefully they did. Okay. Just again, give you a minute. I'm not giving you much time. We'll come back to it. You can go back to it, but just, these two questions. It might help just to write the questions down shorthand and come back. Okay, again, going really fast with you, but you'll come back to it. So then the final big cycle, the Jupiter conjunct Saturn in Aquarius at the very beginning of Aquarius, happened on December 21st, 2020, winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. And here's the character of expansion, expanding your beliefs, expanding yourself, Jupiter, and contraction, making structures, Saturn, coming together really for the first time in a 20-year cycle. That's the normal cycle of 20 years. Jupiter and Saturn come together in the heavens and then move apart. The beautiful solstice star that hopefully you all got to see wherever you live. But then again, I talked about this in another webinar. I'll give you the link to it in a moment. Whereas not only the beginning of a 20-year cycle, but it was the beginning of a 200-year cycle, where Jupiter and Saturn had been coming together for 200 years in signs, zodiac signs of Earth. And now they come together in zodiac signs of the air element. Okay, so it's the end of one 200-year cycle in Earth and the start of a new one in air, with the next societal focus being on freedom, innovation, egalitarianism, and community. And it also, by the way, has a resonance with the age of Aquarius. It's not an exact start of that, but it is in that archetypal stream of moving into a new age. Okay, because Saturn and Jupiter are called the society planets. They have to do with our relationship of being a member of society. We expand and contract, we grow, and we have laws and structure. Okay, so started a new 200-year cycle. And this is from astrology.com. And just their sort of quick synopsis of this change, societal change. The earth element signifies focus on material security and consolidation of resources that is resistant to change. That cycle started in 1802. The era of air, starting now, will bring disruption to established orders and dramatic changes in collective ideas and the way we communicate. This will continue into 2159. Now pause, okay? So this is one of the through lines with what's happening not only in the United States of America, but around the world, where we see situations, politicians, governmental structures that are based on the old order that began around 1802, which is essentially around the growth of the industrial growth society, the militaristic growth society, the top-down, might makes right, I'm grabbing the resources, colonization, genocide of Native peoples, enslavement of people of color, all of that seeded. It was going on way before 1802, but it really started in the North America continent very strongly. And all of that coming to an end of era. So just to say ahead of time, some of the disruption of the domestic terrorists attacking the Capitol in Washington, D.C. this week really is an outcome of the end of an era, and that era is dying and it's not having a good death. It doesn't know it's terminal. And so the patient is fighting for life and saying, no, it's not over. I'm going to hold on to my patterns of grabbing all what I want, being secure, fighting to the death so that I hang on to what I got. Now, I'm not saying this from judgment. This is archetypal experience. And then what's starting to happen with the Jupiter Saturn, the era of air, is disruption to the established orders. Again, no shit, okay, but dramatic changes about who we are as collective bodies and what we want to see and where we want to open up communication and more freedom. Stay tuned. This is a 200-year cycle, but just to kind of land you in this big archetypal change. So if you want to hear more about it, I have a YouTube channel called Transformation Journey Roadmap. Transformation Journey Roadmap. Just write that down. You can also probably Google me on YouTube. And you can go to, I've got quite a number of videos, transformational journey videos, but I have one on, it's my webinar from the Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, the solstice star. So go to that and I'll give you a lot more information on it. Okay. All right, taking a breath. So, again, 2020 might be over in a calendar sense, but we are still very much being worked by and transforming based on those archetypal energies. So thank you for doing a review with me. I felt it was very necessary. So now let's take a breath and turn towards the new year that we've stepped into to look at the key astrology cycles of 2021. Okay, so first up, coming very soon exactly, is what's called Jupiter squares Uranus at 7 degrees of Aquarius Taurus. It's Jupiter in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. I'll say a little bit more of that later. January 17th, 2021 is the exact day it happens. But again, with the astrological cycles, it's not like a light switch on and off. It's like now it's happened, now it hasn't. It has a resonance that stays with us. So essentially, the challenge of this cycle is the need to shift beliefs around freedom and security, both personally and collectively. So let's talk about the archetype of Jupiter, the teacher, the wise one. It brings a gift of expansion. And this one expands consciousness, tracks deeper meanings, shares your unique wisdoms, and questions entrenched beliefs. That's the inner character in us. Now, the mythic character associated with Jupiter is Zeus, the great sky god. And I also like to put in a different version of the teacher, the wise one, an indigenous elder. And it's basically about expansion. Now, whenever Jupiter is at play in a cycle, there is this opportunity to grow, not only literally in the world, but also with our awareness and to address some of our entrenched beliefs. Uranus is the maverick change agent archetype. And this is the character that brings the gifts of uniqueness and liberation from constriction. This one in us and in the world expresses our authentic self, releases externally imposed restrictions, thinks outside the box, and dances with chaos. Uranus is very much a rebel energy. And when it's unconscious, it just destroys for the sake of change. And when especially it feels threatened, like you're imposing your structures on me, I'm going to blow this up. So, it's a very alive character in our collective psyches now. And again, not just in the US. But the sort of positive expression of Uranus as an archetype is the change agent and is willing to change things. The mythic character often associated with Uranus is Prometheus. This is the one who stole fire for humankind and was punished by the gods for such an act of rebelliousness. Okay. And then this sort of trapeze, like, yeah, all right, here we go, change it up. Now, here's just an image that I'm going to help you see when an astrologer says Jupiter square Uranus is trying to sort of show you from the zodiac wheel. You can see near my face, Jupiter, the big gas planet in Aquarius from our perspective on the Earth, and Uranus, which has these beautiful little rings in Taurus the bull. And so from our perspective on the Earth, they look like they're 90 degrees away in the sky, a square. That's what a square means. And energetically, it means there's tension between these archetypes inside ourselves and in the world. Tension's not bad. It's like grit in the oyster. You'll get a pearl eventually, but it does challenge us. Whoa, I got to find an adjustment between these two characters and energies inside me, and the world has to do the same. So Jupiter's in Aquarius. There's the symbol for Aquarius, the water bearer. And the last time Jupiter was in Aquarius was in 2009. Okay, it has about a 12-year cycle of how it goes through the zodiac. Uranus is in Taurus, again, the sign of Taurus the bull. And the last time Uranus was in Taurus is 1934 to 1942. Those of you who know world history, and particularly US history, is a very potent time, just after the disruption of the Great Depression, going into World War II, and the huge disruption of Taurus, which is our security and stability. Now, it's not to be predictive and say we're going to have the same kind of disruption, but we know already we're in deep disruption. It'll have its own flavor for these times. Now, Aquarius as a sign, remember they're the signs, the zodiac signs are the energetic expression of the characters. Aquarius is about innovation, freedom, equality, and systemic change. It wants everyone to be free. And just like, come on, we got to change. So anytime a character is in Aquarius, that character wants change. Saturn's the structure maker. It wants change. Okay. Now, Taurus, the zodiac sign, is earthy and grounded. It's very practical, sensual, stubborn, and resourceful. I don't mean stubborn in a negative way. It just hangs on to what it's got. And it very much wants security. So when a character is in Taurus, there's a grounded, got to stay secure. Now, we have a very unusual quality here that I want you to reflect on is Jupiter is in Aquarius, which is saying, let's expand egalitarian freedom, innovation, in tension with Uranus, the maverick, who's in Taurus, who says, I want to be a change agent and I'm going to do it through your physical resources and security. Your money systems, your government systems, your status quo, your normal. Okay. So boom, all of that's getting changed. We know that. And again, the planets are not causing it. They are mirroring what is naturally happening for us as transformation. So here's a moment to just write down a few things again to attune with the archetypal opportunities of this year. Jupiter square Uranus. What personal beliefs around freedom and security need to shift? And just to point, that may have begun around mid to late 2010. That's the last time Jupiter and Uranus were together. All that means is the arc of an astrological cycle. There's a seed point where things get set up inside of us in the world, and we naturally go through a cycle of development and change with that. But the main thing is to note down in your journal, and take about a minute just to note, again, come back to it, please, is what do you know at this moment coming into 2021 about personal beliefs around freedom and security that have to shift? Okay, so just go ahead and take about a minute to just jot the question down, anything that quickly comes to your mind, and then come back to me. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so on we go. Oops. All right, let's get on to our, okay, so the second and really most significant big cycle of 2021 is Saturn square Uranus. And this is from 7 to 13 degrees of Aquarius Taurus, for those of you who want that data. There's 3 exact times when they're exactly square, but the whole year has the resonance of this cycle. February to December, hello, 2021, okay. And now we've got the need to shift life structures, Saturn, around freedom and security, both personally and collectively. So let's dive in a little bit more to this. So Saturn's in Aquarius like Jupiter. Again, remember, they just came together in the heavens, and Uranus still in Taurus. So again, showing you in the image, now we've, instead of Jupiter, you've got Saturn with his beautiful rings. Same thing from our perspective on the Earth. They look like they're 90 degrees away from each other, those planets, and has that archetypal tension of these two characters. Now, Saturn is the builder, structure maker. And this character in us in the world brings the gift of integrity. This one is responsible and self-accountable, creates clear boundaries, and claims personal authority. Okay, and here's Saturn as the agricultural god, but you also see the scythe of cutting, And many of you who've done astrology lectures with me, either a lot in webinars or live when I used to do that pre-COVID, I used to call Saturn the guy or gal or person with the clipboard. Okay, that's why the clipboard's there, because this is the character in us that wants things grounded, figured out, get a game plan. Okay, it builds, it creates structure. Now, for some completely different than Uranus as the maverick change agent, brings the gift of uniqueness. And as I said before, liberation, constriction. This one wants you to be your authentic self, to release externally imposed restrictions, to think outside the box and dance with chaos. Okay, it blows things up. So you out of the chute, this cycle says in 2021, this is very disruptive because you've got the structure builder, stabilization one combined in a cycle with the change agent, rebel, blow it up and change it. Okay, whoa. We can feel it in our bodies. We can feel it, those of us living in the US, we can feel it deeply, the shock to our system. Uranus is a very shocking archetype, and we've shocked us deeply, profoundly in the last couple of days with our core structures, as a government system. And again, this is not causal, it's archetypal that this is here. So again, Aquarius about innovation, freedom, equality, systemic change, transformation on that level. Taurus, grounded, sensual, wanting to hold on to resources. So again, another moment for you, or minute, I'll give you a minute, I'm quite generous, to just jot down as we're stepping into 2021 with this main cycle of Saturn square Uranus to attune with the archetypal opportunities. What personal life structures around freedom and security need to shift for you? What do you know already? With the understanding that some of these life structures may have their roots from 1988. That's when Saturn and Uranus were last together in the heavens. So it may have reference for you. Some of you may not even been born yet, and that's fine. But just take a minute to just note personal life structures around freedom and security. What changes do I need? That can be your job, where you live, your relationships, your family systems, your identity as a citizen, whatever country you're in. Oh, and LaFlora, if you can put back in the Q&A, the chat, what dates you want. I just looked at that. You wanted those dates again. You maybe want them for Saturn, Uranus. I'll go back to that. Okay, trusting you're going to come back to this. This bears a lot of thoughtful time, and I'm not giving you in this webinar because boom, we got to move on. And my established community knows that, when you're working with me with astrology information, it's like taking a drink from a fire hose. Okay, so pace yourself, people. All right. Okay, so that big cycle. Oh, and then you know what? Let me go back if I can. I think you were asking for the timing with Saturn square Uranus is February 17th, 2021 to December 24th, 2021, with another moment in mid-June that's really strong. Okay, just to give that back to you. Okay, so now that's really key. Two big cycles, Jupiter, Uranus, taking us in 2021, Saturn, Uranus with us the whole 2021. I'm going to go to some other cycles at the end of this part of the lecture on Mercury, but now I want to move to talk about the key initiatory cycles for the United States. And this is my way of supporting my people to try to make some meaning out of what's just happened with the shock to the system, with the terrorist attack, domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol a couple of days ago. So I'm going to share with you two key cycles that the US is having now that are profound. And it's just one way, again, the lens to try to make some sense of what is happening. Now, I want to say where this comes from is every being that is born has an astrology chart, or a horoscope, or a natal chart is called. The same for countries, companies, anything that gets started has a chart. So the United States has a chart. And the chart is a symbolic map. It's a frozen moment in time, a map of the skies. Where were all the planets when the character, the being called the United States was born? And we look at cycles to people or countries' charts, because that chart is a frozen moment in time and the planets keep moving around the zodiac wheel, making aspects or connections to where the planets were when a being was born. When you go to see an astrologer for an annual forecast or reading or consultation, that's what they're doing. They're looking at the map of the planets when you were born, and what are the current cycles that are activating your chart? What are the challenges and the opportunities? Okay. You can do it for a country as well as do it for a person. So there are many things for the US, but the key outstanding ones are two I want you to understand. One's called Neptune opposed Neptune, which is exact from May of 2021 to December of 2022, with the understanding that most of us feel a Neptune cycle at least a year before and continue to integrate and feel its resonance or its presence a year later. So really we're looking at 2020 until 2023 for this one, all right? And you'll see in a moment where you can really tell. That's it. And then the second big cycle for the United States I'm going to talk about is called the Pluto return, which is exact from February of 2022 until October of 2023. Many astrologers, myself included, feel that a Pluto cycle is so rare for an individual and also for a country that we usually feel it 3 to 5 years out. Okay, 3 to 5 years out. So in the case of the US, we could even consider 2017 until 2030 as the long process of this transformational journey. Don't get panicked and don't think, oh my God, Sheila, is this going to keep going for that long? No, we've already lived through the very first edge of this cycle. Even though it formally doesn't start till 2022, we are absolutely in the archetypal shoot of this transformation. So let me talk to you about these two big cycles. For the US, Neptune opposed Neptune, exact May 2021 to December of 2022. Here's the archetypal challenge for us as a country. And I say us, I'm a naturalized American citizen, and yet I live here. Any of us living, having a relationship, being born here, we're in this shoot, okay? On a collective level, the need to dissolve self-deception, release false dreams and addictions, and revision our identity. Need I say more? Okay. We have a lot of self-deception going on, a lot of conspiracy theories, and I'm not saying right or left, everyone. It's like we're caught under a lot of spells, and some of them have no sense at all. They are just total deception, okay? And a lot of addictions, and we're struggling with that as a country, any of us having a relationship with the US. Now, Neptune as an archetype is the dreamer visionary. It brings the gift of vision and connection to alternate realities. This archetype is the one in us that connects to visions, imagination, and the mystical side, and it explores illusions and the call to transcend ordinary reality. Neptune is connected to Poseidon, the mythic god or deity of the oceans. And I gave this image of the dissolving because that's the nature of a Neptune cycle. You have a sense of dissolving. You're just dissolving, okay? It's like, I don't know what's real. It's like altered states that can be very discombobulating initially. Ultimately, in a Neptune cycle, after you get aware of the self-deception and the illusions and clear them to some extent, then there's a visioning time. Okay, now what are the visions that are calling me forward? Okay, there's a natural cycle with this. But again, for the country, a very, very strong core 1.5 year initiation that begins this spring and is already here, as you can tell. Okay, and then there's the Pluto return, which is extremely rare and will only happen to a being that is not a human, because Pluto takes 248 years to go once around the zodiac wheel or once around the sun. And by the way, I just want to say, even though the astronomers have demoted Pluto and it's not a planet anymore, it's considered to be semi-dwarf or a binary system with its moon. I always say Pluto's named after the deity of the underworld, Hades or Persephone, the goddess or god of hell. I wouldn't go pissing off that archetype by demoting it, and you can't eliminate Pluto's energy by demoting it astronomically. So I just want to say it's a planet, it's a character. Now, the Pluto return for the United States is formally, again, February 2022 to October 2023. We are already very much in the shoot of it, because what this cycle calls us to do is, on a collective level, the need to take the identity of the country down to its bones, address the basement shadow issues around power, violence, and manipulation in service to affecting regeneration. Okay, it's profound. A Pluto cycle is a death cycle, and it is extremely painful and it's extremely necessary. It's like we have to lance the poisons. We have to go into the dark basement and say, this actually exists. And in the country soul, it's for the sake of a soul retrieval of the country, actually. And the same on an individual level when a person goes through a big Pluto cycle. And you can see it in the eruption of the racial injustice, the Black Lives Matter. And as a country, my own point of view is we've never faced the shadow of enslavement. We've never faced the shadow of genocidal destruction of First Nation peoples. We've never addressed the shadow of the roots of the country being basically capitalistic and not democratic. Okay, it's like all of that is coming up. And the way we use militaristic power and violence. And hearing me say that, this is not a criticism of the United States. It's a being that is its innate self, and it's in a Pluto cycle. So that means basement time. And there's no escape. Okay, you can't with a Pluto cycle just say, oh, I'm going to hold my nose and walk through it. Nothing's going to happen. It's resistance is futile. Transformation will happen. Regeneration will happen, hopefully in a way that is life-giving. That's the biggest prayer. Okay, so that Pluto return is huge and we're in it, okay? So Pluto as an archetype, the transformer, the revealer of the hidden, brings the gift of the depths and potency. This is the archetype in us in the world that wants deep systemic change, to be real and to get down to the bones. This one explores themes of power, sex, and death and rebirth. Just like, here it is, okay? Hades, here's an image of Hades, a very mysterious transformational being here, this woman being, and then going into the dark caves, going downstairs, okay? So how do we support the collective initiatory cycles for the US? If you want to do this, and I would say any of you who are Americans, who live in the US, who have any kind of connection with the United States as a being, it's like you can help, okay? And those of us living in the US, we are in this cycle and we can't get away from it, okay? So why not lean in and do your transformational work? So with the Neptune opposed Neptune cycle, take it personally with your archetypal work. Transmute the lead into gold, okay? Track where you need to dissolve self-deception, release false dreams and addictions, and revision your identity. It's like, yeah, you can point your fingers and say, wow, the alt-right is in a huge, they're drinking the Kool-Aid of QAnon. Hello, right. Where are you in your own self-deception? Where are you in false dreams and addictions? This is not a value system, who's right and who's wrong. We're in the deep pain and polarization, but it's really like, where are you tracking your own self-deception and your own unhealthy addictions? And where do you need to revision and redream your identity as a citizen? Okay, so that's Neptune opposed Neptune. Again, remember, you will get all this on a PDF, and I'm going to just check my timing. Actually, jot down, I'm going to give you a minute. I'm so generous to just note Neptune opposed Neptune for you as a connector to the US. Dissolve self-deception, just note a couple things down. And again, you'll get the PDF, which will have all this information. You could do a lot more thorough job of it. Give you about a minute for that. And take a breath. I know I'm speaking some really challenging material and it needs to be said. And I'm saying it with heart. Okay. Taking a breath. So now how do you support the collective initiatory cycles for the US with the Pluto return, which again, exactly February of next year until October of 2023, we are already in it, deeply. And actually, I want to give you a little hope. When I've tracked Pluto cycles for individuals or for myself, the hardest part is before the cycle actually starts, because it's when the shattering of the denial of the ego that change has to happen occurs. And once we kind of get into a Pluto cycle, part of us just knows, I surrender, transformation will happen. So we are in the throes of the patient is denying their terminal, the patient being the old ways. And that as we get further into 2021, there's a greater capacity, hopefully on the collective psyche level in the US, to say, oh, the old ways are dying and I can't deny it anymore. Okay, so just to give you some hope, don't get overwhelmed, okay? All right, so the Pluto return, for you, how you can support the US and yourself as a person in the US. Track where you need to take your identity down to the bones. If COVID has probably helped immensely, I'm sorry, but it's an agent of deep change. It's deep change and destructive, but profound transformation. Address basement shadow issues for yourself personally around power, violence, and manipulation for the sake of your self-regeneration. I say this very compassionately, we can see the external domestic terrorists taken down the Capitol, and that is illegal and needs to be addressed. But there's little quiet ways of domestic terrorism inside yourself where you're taking yourself down. You're violent to yourself or violent to other. And so this just like very compassionately and honestly, as Angeles Arian, a brilliant teacher, would say, tell the truth without blame or judgment. Pluto wants truth telling in that core way. So again, take a breath, and you might jot down just the question, identify identity down to the bones, basement shadow issues. I'll give you a minute, and then please go back to it. Okay. All righty. And I do see the really great question in the Q&A, Ruth. Thank you about this. And I'm just going to say here, yes, the question in the Q&A, absolutely. The recording of the PDF you can share with others. It will show up on my YouTube channel next Tuesday. So you can also send people to the YouTube channel as of Tuesday. I'll give you that link, okay? Okay, so I'll come back. There was a great question about the US chart that I'll speak to in the Q&A time. Thank you for that. Okay, so take a breath, love yourself, hug yourself, and your courage, your great courage. In the Vibes community, the membership that I work with, the private membership, we talk about confidentiality, courage, and compassion. Inner work is not for sissies, okay? So thank you for even being willing to go to this webinar and think about these things I'm asking you to think about. So now we're going to change a bit, and I just want to note something with retrograde cycles of planets, and I'm going to speak specifically to something with the domestic terrorist attack this week on the Capitol, and then we'll move into finishing the lecture part with Mercury retrograde cycles for 2021. So stay in there. So retrograde cycles of planets. This is the symbol for retrograde RX. It's a prescription. It's a prescription for change. This is from astrology's point of view, and an astronomer's point of view, when a planet appears to move backwards in its orbit around us. It's not actually happening, as you know, but it's just the angle of as we move around the sun and the planet moves around the sun, the way we see each other in space. So it looks like planets go backwards. That's the retrograde cycle. And the growth opportunities of retrograde times is to take a time out in the areas of life connected to that planetary character, to review, reassess, and redefine. It's always the gift of a retrograde cycle. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about the domestic terrace storming of the Capitol on January 6th. Last year, Mars was retrograde in Aries from September 9th to November 14th. There's something with retrograde cycles called the sensitivity zone. Sometimes astrologers call it the shadow phase, but it just means before the actual retrograde cycle happens, we feel it coming ahead of time. And after it formally ends, we feel it's still finishing up and integrating. Okay. Now, Mars is the warrioress. You'll see this in a moment. It's the advocate, but it has to do with our power, our strength, our vitality, but also our anger and our unconscious violence. Now, notice Mars retrograde in Aries, even though it formally was done last year in mid-November, the sensitivity zone of it did not finish until January 3rd, a couple of days ago, right? Now, what the challenge was with Mercury retrograde in that time period for last year, track what diminishes your life energy, the battles you no longer need to fight, and what is the source of your anger and how to resolve it. Okay, so part of the domestic terrace storming is just finishing the Mars retrograde and this deep question of what are the battles we no longer need to fight? How do we resolve our anger? Well, if we stay unconscious in a retrograde cycle, what happens is the energy just gets activated and we can work unconsciously. So I have no idea because I'm not one of them, but I imagine some of those domestic terrorists, they thought their backs up against the wall. There's nothing else they can do. They're just going to have to fight. It's like this unconscious Mars energy. And the Mars energy, the character brings a gift of desire and action. This one in us takes action and goes after what is wanted, expresses desires and anger, and stewards your physical vitality. It's an advocate. It's a champion. In a conscious way, it fights for what it believes in. This is Mars, Aries, the god of war and the mythic character, and then a warrioress and also an advocate. Okay. So when this character is alive in us, if it's positive and we're conscious of it, it gives us the capacity to move forward and take a stand and to stand up for what we believe in and what we want. When it's unconscious, it's very deep, difficult anger and violence. Now, here's the thing that blows my mind with what happened in the domestic terrorist attack on January 6th. Mars has been in Aries since June 28th of 2020. It left the sign of Aries on January 6th of 2021 at 5:27 p.m. EST. Okay. What I could see from the astrologers who worked with it, the first attack on the Capitol happened at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A couple of hours with Mars finishing its journey in Aries, its 6 months journey in Aries. When something is at the very end of a time in a sign, it's like the ultimate end of the line. Okay, so everything that had been building up with Mars and Aries on an archetypal level, personally and collectively, since late June, and also before that, because a lot of people, particularly the one identified as our president, was putting fuel on the fire, but everything was coming to a head. All right. And so, boom, this attack happens hours before Mars leaves Aries, a deep, intense, powerful fire sign, and goes into Taurus, grounded, take a breath, take stock. What is the price I'm paying for this? Okay. Whew. So Mars and Aries, learn to steward anger, assess the costs of the battles you fight, address unconscious patterns of impulsiveness, violence, and running over others. Develop the ability to be an advocate in service to something greater than self. Okay, whoa, right there. So some of us felt that energy at the very end of Mars and Aries and said, there's nothing else I can do. I have to storm the Capitol. Okay, I feel in service to something greater than myself. We may not agree with what they believe in, but boom. Others, like some of our representatives and senators, said, holy shit, I have to be in service to something greater than my political agenda and my power manipulations. All right, like, whoa, there it is. So there's other ways you can look at it, but just to name the resonance with the archetypes and actual events on Earth. So for all of us, as we're shook by what's happened, we can look at, how do I steward my anger? How do I advocate? What are the battles I'm fighting that I need to stop fighting? How can I use my anger and my fiery energy to be an advocate in service to something greater than myself? Very, very strong archetypal lesson. Okay. So I just want to say that. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and finish with retrograde cycles of Mercury. Thanks for your patience. I will take a little bit more than an hour for the lecture, so if you need to step out, you'll get the replay. You can even drop a question in the Q&A box. Yes, the guided journey will be recorded separately. Okay, so if you need to leave now, the replay, you'll be able to have the experience of the guided journey. It'll be a separate audio file. You can go ahead and take the time to do that. So thank you for asking. Okay, so remember, when a retrograde planet is retrograde, it's a growth opportunity to review and reassess and redefine. So what I want to finish with is two planets in the retrograde cycles, 3 with Mercury and 1 with Venus. So Mercury is retrograde 3 times in 2021. It's usually always retrograde 3 times in a 3-week period. When it's retrograde this year in 2021, they're in the air signs. They're zodiac signs of air. So it has a lot to do with the mind and understanding a bigger perspective and communication. Here's the dates, and I'll go through each of them. And again, I'll remind you, you'll get a PDF as a download when you get the replay. So a link to that, so you don't have to scribble away. You can come back to it, because again, you're drinking from a fire hose, people. Thank you. Okay. So Mercury as an archetype is the communicator messenger, and has to do with the gift of expression. This is the one in us that receives and processes information, analyzes and discerns, make bridges, and is open to change and diversity. Mercury in us plays the devil's advocate. Well, what about this? It's it's very much a trickster character in us. It's like, have you thought about this? What about this? Oh, let's try this. Shapeshifter, trickster. And here's an image of the mythic Mercury, the winged god. And this is also another image of Mercury, the rainbow goddess, and then the journal, the writing, the expression. So Mercury's areas of life have to do with communication, ideas, and the stories you share and tell yourself. The stories are everything. When Mercury's retrograde, and especially in 2021, because they're in air signs, all the retrograde cycles, couple like overviews, track what stories are done. Stop telling the same story. That's shelf life is over, has no life force. Let it go. Stop it. Okay. Think things through. Engage brain before opening mouth if you can. Okay. And also, what forms and attitudes with your communication need to shift. Those are just overarching themes of Mercury's retrograde cycles in 2021. So the first one up is coming pretty soon. It's Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, again, between 26 and 11 degrees, if you can use that data, from January 30th to February 20th. The sensitivity zone means when we're sensitive to the energy coming, the change coming, January 15th to March 14th. Okay, so it's a 2-month period, but then there's a specific, about 3 weeks when we're in the chute with it. Okay, now this specific Mercury retrograde cycle, here's the old stories to track: where you feel marginalized, where you're being unemotional and overly logical. My mind's made up, don't confuse me with the facts. Okay, where you're a pissed off rebel. Okay, no judgment, just notice old stories about that. Let them go. Again, you'll get the PDF on this. Okay. And then you're shifting, you're revisioning. Shift to an empowered ability to let your freak flag fly, people, and connect with your kindred spirit tribe, okay? It's like everybody's weird and different. Stop trying to be normal. It's highly overrated. And by the way, normal is over. It's one of the extraordinarily unwelcome, but also welcome gifts of COVID. Normal is over, all right? So let your freak flag fly, all right? So that's the first Mercury retrograde cycle in January, February of this year. The second one is in Gemini, between 24 and 16 degrees of Gemini. It's from the exact retrograde cycle between May 29th and June 22nd. Sensitively, we'll feel it from May 15th to July 8th. Again, the sensitivity zones, we feel it coming, we're in it, and we still keep working with it. Now, Gemini is the sign of communication, the twins, other points of view, okay? So the old stories to track in May and June with this cycle are where you feel polarized, you're caught in a black and white, where you're being distracted and superficial, and where you disassociate by staying in your head. Just like, oh, no, can't, no, don't feel that, can't, no, just stay in my head, okay? Those are challenges. Let go of those old stories and those old patterns. I understand, easier said than done. and shift to an empowered ability to see both sides of the coin and bridge dualities. Talk amongst yourself, people. Like, look at what these beautiful sheep are doing, okay? So see both sides of the coin and lean into bridge dualities. Heaven knows we will need people, that skill set and that prayer, embodied prayer in 2021, okay? And then finally, the third Mercury retrograde cycles in Libra. Whoops, you can't see this. I wonder if I can move it for you. Between 25 degrees and 10 degrees of Libra, 25 to 10 degrees of Libra. Okay, I don't know if that actually worked in the recording. From September 26th to October 18th. We'll be sensitive to this retrograde cycle from early September, September 7th to November 3rd. The sensitivity zone is usually about 2 months. We feel it coming, we get right into the 3-week intense retrograde cycle, and then we still work with it on the way out. Here's the growth opportunities for this third Mercury retrograde cycle in 2021. Track your old stories in relationships. Libra's about relationships inside and out. Look at enmeshment issues. Look at making nice to keep the peace. And patterns of disrespect for self and other. Again, no judgment, just notice these old patterns and stories, review them and go, oh, that's too small for me. Let it go. I know, easier said than done. And then shift to an empowered, reciprocal, and honest relationships inside and out. That's the challenge and the opportunity in this Mercury retrograde cycle. Okay, take a breath. Fire hose is still going for a little bit longer. Okay, wrapping it up for the lecture part of this webinar. Venus is retrograde in Capricorn. Whoops, I didn't put the dates for you. Sorry about that. I don't think I can put them in. It'll be in the PDF when you get it. I'm trying to remember, it's all in Capricorn. From December 19th of 2021 to January 29th of 2022, there's something quite powerful about the very end of this year. Venus says, okay, now I'm going retrograde, right? Because Venus is the archetype of the lover and the relational one. She brings us, or he brings us, or they bring us the gift of relationality. This one in us expresses your values and core relationship needs. This one follows your heart, receives and gives pleasure, and loves yourself. Okay, and here's Venus Aphrodite. Here's an image of Venus and then an image of relationships. There's multiple ways. I'm just trying to evoke something with the images I put here. Now, here's our degrees. Okay, Venus is retrograde in Capricorn from 26 degrees to 11 degrees from December 19th, 2021 to January 29th, 2022. We will start feeling this energy November 18th of 2021 and continue to feel it through March 2nd, early March of 2022. Basically, shorthand astrologers always say Venus is about love, money, and values. Okay, love of all kinds. Money doesn't have to be physical money, it's resources and values. What do you love? What do you care about? Venus retrograde in Capricorn will challenge you to track the price you're paying for being too responsible in relationships. The relationship contracts that are unsustainable that you've made, probably unconsciously, no judgment, and where you need to claim authority to steward your resources. She's very executive, Venus, or they are very executive in Capricorn. It's like, right, what do I really want my life to be? How do I make this happen? Where do I cut my losses? Okay, and it's not a cold thing. It's a very kind of clear, embodied inner authority piece. That's the very end of the year. Venus will give us that. Okay. All right, taking a breath one more time. So now it's the Q&A time. All right, we're just past the hour, and again, those of you that need to go, you can listen to the replay, and I'm starting the Q&A at about 1 hour and 4 minutes, or about 1 hour into the webinar. And again, the guided imagery journey that's coming will be recorded separately as an audio journey, so you can go to it then. So thank you, those that need to step out, and those that are still with me. I'm going to go to the Q&A. Yes, okay. So a question, I had 2 questions come in when I was talking about the US cycles. And one of them is, can you get an example of another country that has gone through these cycles, the Pluto return and Neptune to Neptune, what has been the outcome? I'm not able to do that. Thank you for that question, because I just can't grab that information at the, just like that. But what I did do while you were writing is I went and got the US chart. There's several versions of the US chart. But the second question this one asked is there anything about the houses or signs that these two cycles for the US are happening in that can instruct us about these times? Thank you for that beautiful question. And I'll try to translate it in a layperson terms, so I'm not doing techno babble, astrology babble, and losing everyone except the core astrologers. So I've just pulled up on my phone the astrology chart for the US, one version of it, okay? And in one version of the chart, Neptune in the US's chart is in what we call the fifth house. And the houses just have to do with where the archetypal energy expresses itself. And one way to look at this, the fifth house is where we are seen and are visible in the world. And for the US, with the Neptune in the fifth house, it signifies the way that we are a huge archetypal representation of vision and aspiration, freedom, democracy. Okay. It's like that's one expression of that part of our chart as a country. So the opposition is challenging that and saying, well, are you really that? Is that really what you're being? You're seen as that, but is that true? Or are there other dimensions of your being as a country that really are not about being this great placeholder of freedom and vision and compassionate welcoming of all who want to come to Lady Liberty? Again, not criticizing the US, just saying these are the questions that the Neptune opposition challenges us, anyone connected to the US, is really, are we living that aspiration? Are we living that dream? And if there's some self-deception, can we shift that? Okay, and the second one was the Pluto question. Pluto in one version of the US chart is in the ninth house of its chart. Ninth house is about wisdom and teaching and principles. And so the Pluto return for the US in the ninth house challenges us to say, okay, you have these stated principles. Where's your shadow material? Are you living them? Are you living your truths? Or you actually not? And what is the dogma and what is the hidden layer of the ninth house? Its wounded side is very, very dogmatic and very self-righteous. So that's part of what's getting purged. So thank you so much for that question. That's just a little bit of what I'm going to say. And then two more questions have come in. I'm unclear about Uranus and Taurus. Isn't Uranus in detriment in Taurus? How might this express? So that's a technical term from astrology, and I recognize it, but I'm not going to go down that path out of respect for the lay people. But basically, Uranus and Taurus, you look at it this way: the archetype of the change agent, the maverick, the liberator, is expressing through a sign that wants security and stability in the physical form. So there's incredible dissonance in that signature. It's not that it's wrong. It just means it's kind of crazy making, that it basically says there's something in us that's saying change our physical security systems, money, government. And yet another part of it is saying don't change. You know, I want radical change, but not that kind of change. Okay. And that's just an archetypal tension we have. Again, it's not wrong. The first thing I think of as an example is we might consider ourselves progressives and enlightened liberals and say, we got to do something about Black Lives Matter. And then the question comes, are you going to do reparations? Okay. That's like a Uranus and Taurus question. What does that mean? Okay. Not that we should, but it's like, oh, that's the change we're talking about, or one of the changes we're talking about. Okay. So that's one, just a brief example of that. And then finally, another question, wondering about the increasing interest in spirituality meditation currently, and if the Neptune cycle will deepen and expand this. Yes, thank you for that question. That Neptune in its greatest support for all of us is about our mystical, spiritual part of ourselves, the one of us in connection to something beyond ourselves, the divine, however you would define that. So when the country has a Neptune cycle, we both are caught in our self-deception and illusion and our the spells we put ourselves under. We're also feeding the dream and the longing for spiritual connection, for God, for Goddess, for Buddha nature, for union with the divine. And yes, so that's one of the ways we can help the country now, is deepen into our spiritual practices and be looking for more conscious connection with the divine. So thank you for that question. Okay, I think I'm going to check and then I'm going to stop. I think I've got them all for now. Okay, thank you all for those fabulous questions. Really appreciate. Oh, okay, great. And I just want to come back to, there was a great comment in the chat and says, not sure we can integrate fascism. What do you think? You seem to be avoiding the shadow of fascism. Thank you for that question. Not avoiding the shadow of fascism, but rather um, challenging us to be really careful that whenever we polarize and project, oh, that's fascism, that's wrong. It is wrong. It harms. It's very, very destructive. But the challenge that Pluto asks us to say is, where is the inner fascist in me? Where am I unconsciously having some resonance with that energy that, when it's taken to the extreme, is tremendously destructive and should not be fed? But that's, I'm not ignoring the fascism point, but I want to challenge all of us to not polarize and say it's the not me part of ourself. It's actually, fascism is here in the world channel. So what's my part of it, and what's my work to do to integrate that and heal it? So thank you for that question. That's great. Okay, I think I have one more and then I'm going to stop. Okay. Okay, you're welcome. All right, dear ones. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to actually give you a moment to breathe, and give myself a moment to breathe. So I'm going to stop the recording with this. Thank you so much who've been on the lecture for your stamina, an hour and 15 minutes. Right. Okay, we're going to stop this.